we are on our next step of putting elastic into our turn diaper. What I have here is a nice, large, heavier weight quilting bob safety pin. I use these because they're easier to feel when I'm putting the elastic in the casing, and they don't bend as much when you're pushing the elastic through. I use this for the waist elastic. This is an elastic threader made for 3/8 inch elastic, I think, and possibly 1/2 inch elastic. They come in a 3-pack with 3 different sizes. They sell them on WowWack for like $1 something. Invaluable, especially for regular turn diapers. And then we have here 3/8 inch polyester braided elastic. I purchased mine in bulk at wholesale. WowWack sells it. Joann's sells it. It's pretty easy to come by. The more you buy, the cheaper it will be. But for the purposes of this diaper, we're going to use about 1 yard. So we have, what I do is for the waist elastic, I actually cut a piece of elastic, and this piece measures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 inches for the waist elastic. So what I do is I take my safety pin, and I put it through the elastic about 1/2 inch, right? 1/2 inch from the end, and I seal it up. And then I get my diaper. Alright, get the diaper. And I feed the elastic up through the bottom where we left our hole. And I go over to, I'm right-handed, so this might change depending on if you're right-handed. I go to the right wing, and that is where I insert the elastic into the waist elastic casing that we made earlier. Now, when I'm putting my elastic in, we have a seam allowance inside, so it's like a little bit thicker right here, right? I put my elastic on the very top of that allowance so that the elastic is sitting between the top layer and the bottom layer. And I start feeding it in until that elastic, which you can feel inside the wing, is sitting about 1 inch, maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch from where you ended your casing stitch. We're getting close. We're right here. If you pull too far, pull it back out and start over. Alright, a little bit more. Okay, so the end of my elastic is right here. My stitch starts right here. That is good enough for me, so I'm going to go ahead and tack it down. I sew 1 stitch over, I lift my presser foot, I move my diaper over like 1/16 of an inch, put my presser foot back down, and I sew again so that there's 2 seams holding the elastic in. Okay, now we grab our elastic, our safety pin, and we pull it all the way through the casing. Until we get the safety pin over in this wing. I pull it as tight as I can, and that is when you measure how far your casing stretches, right? Because we want the diaper casing to stretch out as far as it can, as if there was no elastic in it, right? And no further than that. We don't want to stretch it out all the way and then still have some elastic inside the casing that can stretch further. And we don't want it to not stretch enough. So all elastic is created differently. Some elastic stretches more than others, some of it doesn't stretch as much. So usually I don't measure, I just feel. Like right now, that is as far as I can stretch my elastic. But we still have some fabric bunching. That means that it needs to have a little bit more elastic in the waist. So I'm holding it with this hand, right? And I'm pulling until all the way the fabric is extended and the elastic is extended. This is where I will sew down. Right here is where I'm going to sew it down. Now, once I put it under my presser foot, I'm going to have to re-pull it and feel where that ends up being, because I lose it while I'm doing that. So right now, I'm stretching. That's as far as the elastic is going to let me stretch. I need to put more elastic in the waist. So I'm going to stretch it. That is as far as the fabric allows me to stretch and the elastic allows me to stretch. So that's where we're going to tack our elastic down. Okay, now for those of you who are a little bit confused about that, my measurement for how far between my two seams are is, let's see here, and keep in mind we have a good 1/2 inch of elastic on each side. We have it right at, my seams are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches apart. So we cut our elastic at 5.5 inches. We leave a 1/2 inch on one side and a 1/2 inch on one side, and then we sew our seam 5 inches apart after it's been ruffled. And I'm assuming you'll probably have questions about that part. And honestly, it is probably the hardest part in explaining how I make a diaper, because I really do it by feel. What I used to do back when I first started making diapers was put a mark on my sewing machine, my little table that I used at the time. I wrote in Sharpie on it, like right here. And I knew that when I was doing elastic, from my needle to that point, that's how far I needed to stretch my elastic. Then I got this clear tabletop, and I never ended up putting it back on because I never used it again. But now what we're going to do is put the elastic in the leg casings, okay? So I have my roll of elastic over here. We're not cutting it this time. I'm getting my elastic threader, threading my elastic into it. Now you can use a safety pin for this as well. It just is faster for me to use an elastic threader. Same idea. We're putting the elastic in. We're feeding it through on top of our seam allowance in the leg casing so that the elastic is sitting directly underneath our top layer and our hidden layer, on top of our velour and on top of our seam allowance in the casing. I'm feeding it all the way up to that right wing, and right before I get to the end of it, because I'm using an elastic threader, I'm going to pull that elastic threader away from the elastic and hope that it doesn't pull too far and leave elastic down inside the casing. If you are not familiar with using one, use a safety pin, tack it down, and don't even worry about it. You can tack it down and then remove the safety pin. Then you know you have enough elastic hanging over outside of your casing. But I pulled it. I have about this much. That's good enough for me. That's good enough. I'm not going to worry about pulling any more out, and I'm going to tack it down. Okay, now we have it down. My elastic threader is still in, so I'm going to pull it back out. I always make it a point to pull my elastic threader out before I tighten my elastic, because then I don't forget. Because believe me, I have forgotten. And it's not fun to do the final snaps on a diaper and then feel a safety pin or an elastic threader inside and have to rip it open. And anyway, so now we're pulling just like we did with our waist. We have our elastic and we're pulling it tight inside that leg casing, and we're getting it. And what I usually do, same way as before, is I end up putting my end here, and I have elastic in one hand, right? And I'm kind of holding on to it, and I can feel inside the diaper leg right here, that is where the elastic is, and I hold it down tight, and I take the end where we have it tacked right here, and I pull on it like this until the diaper fabric stretches all the way to its maximum and the elastic stretches to its maximum, and no more than that. So we have it stretched out, and then I tack it down. Okay. And I trim my elastic off inside the diaper about 1/2 inch from where I tacked it down right here. And that measurement, if you prefer measurements, is, I'm having to do math backwards. From casing, from tack down to tack down is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 inches is where that ended up laying. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Feeding it in. Now, this part, I do it one way. There's not only one way to do this, but I make sure that I have the same thread color on my bobbin and my thread for this, because I do this leg elastic upside down because of feeling the stretch the right way. Now, if you're measuring your elastic, there's no reason to do that. If you're cutting your elastic before feeding it in, you're going to want to make sure you put a safety pin on one side so that you can pull it back out when you need to. That sort of thing. Oh, it would help if I actually trimmed that. Okay. We're about out. Okay. Now I'm going to tack this side down. I'm removing my elastic threader from the wing. And I'm pulling my elastic tight. Placing it under my presser foot. Grabbing it, stretching it out as far as it'll go, tacking it down. Okay, we have the elastic in our diaper. So what we're going to do now is I turn my needle over to the right hand position because I'm about to top stitch, and this top stitch requires a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So some people go through and press their seams on the front of their diaper to make sure that it's folded down. I did that at first, but I don't anymore. If you are not familiar with top stitching a seam like this closed, I would advise doing that. Maybe using some Wonder Tape to hold those seams together or some spray adhesive. Either way, you left a pretty good seam allowance down here, if you remember when we were trimming, to be able to fold it over and close that seam up. So I start over up here and I top stitch this bottom part of our diaper closed. Okay. And we are officially done with our turned diaper. After you finish seaming it up, trim all your threads, add a tag if you want to, add your snaps down here on your wing, your bum snaps, and the next video will be of us sewing up the soaker with a sewing machine, which I've never done before, so this will be new for me, and in case you don't have a serger. That way you can still use the same type of soaker with your diaper. Anyway, so good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. This is probably the hardest part of the diaper making process, in my opinion, so questions are good. Ask a question because someone else might want to ask it and be too afraid to. So, good luck.